So to give context, I guess we're starting. Cha-ching! What's up, everybody? Yeah, so to give context, we were in the sauna with our buddy Ross, who I hope to have on the podcast. Shout out Ross. And he was just discussing, when he was 21, he was thinking about going into the Marines, and he signed up for a initiation Hell Week kind of opportunity. I don't believe it was an actual Hell Week to really officially go into the Marines, but it was a show. Actually, he said it was a show. It was for a show.
I don't know what was at stake.
Yeah. And so it's just this. He'll tell his story and the drills and the experience that he went through alongside other men and maybe women. I don't know, but yeah, he talked about how within 3 to 4 hours there were some people that dipped out. They were like, "Fuck this! This is so unbelievably physically challenging." But it's, as we were stating in the sauna, it's mental. It's mostly mental, and yeah, just like I can't even imagine like what he was talking about.
That'll be a dope episode.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Yeah,
to hear him kind of like expand on that, and then where that how that integration works in the rest of your life, especially having only made it 3 days.
Yeah,
like even me trying a Vipassana and quitting after 3 days, it's like,
oh really?
Yeah, but it's just like, you know, you have it in your head that you backed out of a challenge or something like that, and so then you
got to step up to the plate again.
Well, then when you get presented with the challenge again, it's in your head that is that quitter loud again?
Are you gonna do it again?
Are we gonna feel that? But
yeah,
dude, the beauty of Squatch is like the sauna and the conversations that you have in there, and I think it's how, honestly, I think it's how we first met before the Live a Great Story.
I think so. Yeah, it's definitely been around Squatch. So I'm trying to remember which Live a Great Story night that Zach. It might have been the second one then that we met, where your sister was there. And but yeah, Squatch has been amazing. And I totally agree. A part of me has invited people that I just randomly meet in the sauna to like come on the podcast because the conversations are so amazing. The people that are attracted to this specific gym here in Austin seem to be, well, one, they've gone through challenges.
They're seekers.
They're seekers, huh?
Everyone has gone down a different fucking rabbit hole, and then you go in the sauna and you kind of like, people just open up about the latest onion they're peeling back, and you're hearing about Egyptian sex magic. You're hearing about psychedelic journeys. You're hearing about someone going on a TV show to get their ass kicked.
Yeah,
it's
ayahuasca. Different psychedelics, regenerative agriculture,
carnivore
diet, and they should do that. We should definitely. No, where are you at, bro? we're gonna get some kind of sauna infrastructure that allows you to flip a switch to record everybody in the room, which is kind of dangerous though at the same time.
Well, I was gonna say it seems just like a great area to find people for the podcast, and so it's like now it's a recruiting mechanism.
Yes,
to hang around the sauna and show up with like a list of ideas, and then you start talking about one of them. And if anyone starts to add a whole bunch, you're like, okay, I got a spot next week.
Yeah.
We'll book it. Yeah, and we're gonna go in.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the sauna is just Squatch in general. I repeat myself every single episode. Sorry, guys. But it's how the flow of this podcast has been going. It's a big part of my life. There's so many different people that I'm meeting. There's another Noah. So not Noah Heisman, but another shout out to Noah. He's potentially going to come on the podcast, and he's a very interesting character. So there's like all these just different people that I can hit up. Even Ellie. Mindful.
She's gonna be the first guest on my podcast.
Ooh.
Experiences explored.
Experiences explored. So let's get into that a little bit. What so you've mentioned this once to me in the past. You want to get into the podcast space and experience explored. Is it just going to be kind of stories or?
I want to host people that host retreats or workshops or events that are, they've spent the 10,000 hours in a certain area, and they offer these immersive experiences that I found myself super drawn to in the past 2 years. I think I've gone or participated in maybe like 10 to 15 different retreats or songwriting workshops or things like that. And it's such a quick immersion into a subject area, and there's no kind of pressure to put the learning path on yourself as far as if there's a certain subject that I'm super interested in. This is, one of my things is just getting curious about something, and then I'm ordering 3 books, and then I'm looking online, and I'm watching different YouTube channels, and I'm just piecing everything together. And you never know when you're going to come across the right nuggets. And so I found myself signing up for these retreats, and then finding that the people that I meet at those it's like the sauna squatch. It's like the squatch sauna. That everyone has they're seekers, and they go down these places, and they've introduced me to other workshops. I just got back from a breathwork retreat in the Netherlands, and after that, I went and stayed with a friend that I met at a previous retreat, and he introduced me to one of his friends who's gone down this myofascial energetic release.
Myofascial?
Myofascial.
Myo.
MYO. Fascial.
Facial?
Energetic release. I think fascial isn't like fascia.
I don't even know what that means.
Fascia is like the connective tissue that holds muscles onto the skeleton.
Okay.
I believe it's my understanding of what fascia is. But this dude, so I was like, well, do you have an opening tomorrow? Like, can I book one of these massages? Because I'm curious. He's just he's lighting up about it. He's like, I want to be. He's talking about it. His name's Bob. Shout out Bob.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, this is something that he was an animator in Vancouver, was working in a TV show, and just got burnt out. And then he went and did ayahuasca. And then he started, I think after the ayahuasca retreat, there was another retreat happening at that center. And they're like, oh, you'd be really interested in this myofascial energetic release. This guy that was teaching it was, have you heard of Osho meditations?
Yeah.
Wild Country, Osho. This guy was Osho's body work expert for like 3 or 4 years. And so he has this method of massage, and it's energetic release. So it's like a crazy deep tissue massage. And this guy was like elbow on my spine and just like leaning into it with all of his body weight and just like slowly dragging across. And the whole time he's like, well, before he kind of introduced it, it's like, it's not going to be pleasant, but we're going to try to work with like a 6 or 7 on the pain scale throughout. And this, we're going to stay there. And I was like, all right, sign me up. And, I woke up the morning after, and it felt like I had already been stretching for an hour.
Wow.
Like there was no kind of like, I have a little bit of like a morning stretch routine where just to get like my spine woken up.
Yeah.
Working on bridges and stuff like that. And typically my back is usually kind of rocked in the morning. And this MER. So then he's introducing me to the retreat, and he's like, you can go to Poland and do it. And he's like, there's 6 different levels. Maybe there's 7 different levels, but each one is focused on a different body part or area. So one's just like head and neck, one the back, one this other thing. But yeah, I've gotten massages before, and this didn't feel like a massage. It was like I would say like an acupressure type of massage where he's just like really getting into certain areas and then dragging through and then like digging into my armpit as hard as you can and pulling my arm in different ways and just like.
That scares me a little bit.
It's
He's just like, get your shoulder out of place.
Yeah, it's not. I was melting away into an experience, but not the way that you do at a massage.
Yeah.
I would get like random visuals of different characters. Things would pop up, and then my brain couldn't even hold on to or like create a through line of what was happening. And then at one point, he was massaging my head, and I just saw a little alien in like a control center. Like it looked like Men in Black. Like it was for like 10 seconds, and I was like, I don't know what's going on with this myofascial energetic release.
I've never heard of myofascial. So so it seems massaging that tissue that is difficult to otherwise do yourself leaves you pretty nimble.
Yeah, and I'm realizing that I totally took that tangent off of Experiences Explored. So
yeah, that
is another thing that I'd be curious to dive down is like going to check out one of those bodywork things. And we were talking earlier about that book, King, Magician, Warrior, Lover, and just read that yesterday, and it repeatedly just kicked me in the balls, like again and again, talking about the different shadows. But one of them of the lover is one of the shadows. The active shadow is the addict. It's the one that just
lustful,
just keeps seeking new things, and like it's like it stung a little bit to read that and be like, oh, I thought, leaning into my curiosities and just jumping around doing all this stuff was feeding me. But when not looking back, but now realizing that I'm constantly just drawn shiny object syndrome to different subjects and different things. And there's not a consistent through line, but I typically liked where Steve Jobs was talking about, he's like, don't try to connect the dots going forward. He's like, you can only connect them looking back. And so I thought, okay, like if I'm getting the itch to go do something, like listen to it and follow it. And then
there's a dilemma there though. And in the modern age, especially to be able to concentrate that advice probably worked in Steve Jobs' lifetime. Before definitely before the internet and then the uprise of the internet, because things are more, we were just discussing the amount of information, the access to information, and you can just get pulled in so many. I have so many unread books on my bookshelf. I have so many bookmarked websites and articles and podcasts. And it's great that, because there's some people that don't have this natural curiosity. They're kind of just like deadheads, they don't really want to take the time to read and investigate. Like it's great that you have that. So one, you can be grateful to have that natural curiosity, but to follow the advice of what Steve Jobs just said, I think you have to be disciplined with the subjects that you dive into. And so that's something that's super challenging for me too. Like I said, I keep buying more and more books, and then I'm like, dude, I haven't read these 6 books here. And so to lean into what really stimulates your interest is a good, I believe it's a way to navigate within your lifetime how to optimally live this life. But it's hard, especially with the internet and the access of just Alexandria, right? Infinite amounts of information.
Yeah. And Amazon, that'll just send you books on a subject in 2 days. I had book disease like crazy in 2020. I think I read like 60 books that year, but that coincided with a bit of a depressive state.
Yeah.
Where it's just like just the constant accumulation of all these different things. Yeah. And then
you don't know what to do.
As soon as you finish, like literally like finish a book, put it down, pick up another one.
Yeah, that's what I was doing kind of too. So yeah, with not putting it into action, you kind of get lost. You have to be able to like write about what you just read, and so It's such a challenge for sure.
Well, one thing that really helped on this past breathwork retreat that I went on, it was kind of on how to become a breathwork coach. And I didn't even want to attend this. I wasn't intentionally trying to attend this retreat. There was one last year where it's just like an alumni gathering where all the people who have taken a prior retreat with Casper Vandermeulen, the breathwork professional and just overall human that I really vibe with his take on life.
Okay.
But then another retreat, this movement workshop in Berlin, got scheduled for the exact same days. And I really wanted to do that one. And I was like, okay, well, instead of just attending like a gathering of people, I asked them if I could push off that ticket that I bought to a future retreat with him.
Okay.
And so this one was for like a different certification. So I was like, I'll just do that. But one thing that they kind of had us work on that really started to help me narrow my focus on certain aspects was finding the problem that you're solving. And he talked about it and no one wants to buy breath work. Like no one's trying to breathe better. You need to sell the solution to a problem that they have. Like, are they not sleeping well? Are they stressed out? Are they having dysfunctional emotional regulation? Like, what problem are you solving? And so even though the business that I'm working on right now is building an app, and so during that week, that's just kind of like the angle that I was taking on it, and realized that the problem that I want to solve is coherence between your thoughts, words, and actions. And particularly for young professionals that are successful in their careers and they're on a self-development journey, but things aren't slowly adding up or they're still not feeling fulfilled in a certain way. They're thinking that next self-help book is going to, give them the grit or the discipline or the alignment of what they're trying to do and what they're working on. But then having that high level understanding of the problem that I'm trying to solve of coherence, I want to build technical solutions to do that thing. So I've had this idea for a few different apps, but they all fall under that category. So while initially in my head, they were kind of scattered and all over the place. And I was like, didn't know which one to tackle first or what reason or why am I doing this in general. Having it under that blanket now gave me some borders to work between, which coming back to king, warrior, magician, lover, that's, that king archetype that sets the rules and then you work within the rules. It creates the borders and now you can operate within them. And that gives structure and keeps the monkey mind from flying all over the place and the racing mind from chasing every object.
There's so many things that I wanted to say as you've been discussing, because you've talked about you've brought up the podcast you want to bring up, the fact that you're making an app that would help people become more aligned and in coherence with their thoughts and their actions and their way of being. And so that's very fascinating. I think that if you had more human beings that were in coherence with just aligned with themselves, the world would be a much, I don't know, I hesitate to say better, but I think that the energy within the world right now is pretty chaotic. You could agree, right? With COVID and other things that have occurred, but so that's kind of the message I've received, even through work. Some colleagues of mine have discussed how that's the appeal within many different areas. Like there's a lot of sentiment that we're in a chaotic time, whether it's COVID, whether it's potential nuclear war, whether it's like mental health and physical health deteriorating and through the internet or whatever, just all these different innovations and technologies advancing, and are we really becoming healthier? And so there's just a lot of disruption, and for the world to be more aligned and for you to be more coherence, and to create an app that would potentially help people with that.
The goal,
that's cool.
In my mind, would be that you don't need to create a better world, but just like inner peace. And that was something that I struggled with in my last career. I was a data and analytics engineer or consultant and was working on these problems that I didn't really care about. And was on my self-help journey. I was reading all the books. I was doing the different things. I was diving into Wim Hof. I was diving into breath work, cold exposure, exercise, all this stuff, but was constantly itching until until I found what problem that I really wanted to solve.
Yeah.
And now it feels kind of meta to be like, oh, well, the problem that I'm going to solve is the app that's going to help people solve that problem for themselves versus like, is that.
Are you actually solving your own problem?
Exactly. Well, that's, they tell you to make the tool that you need for yourself.
Yeah.
And then if you're your target customer, now you don't need to build the first iteration and then go find the target customer to get them to try it out. It's like, well, is it working for me? And then even if no one else uses it, well, if it helps me get it, then gold. Like it's, then it worked for what it needed to do.
Yeah.
At least with user one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I found that a lot in the consultant world that I was in. That there's a lot of people that are like, you know what, this job pays well, got money. I'm going to go do the things that I want to do, and I'm going to be able to explore the things that I want to explore and all that stuff. But the hours you spend at work of like 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week for X number of years, ideally you should feel fulfilled in that you're solving problems that help you sleep at night. And then it's not your job to go do extra things outside of it to then get your fulfillment.
Yeah.
So not saying you have to change your job, but maybe you change the frame that you look at it. And that's, I've got a friend who I met with for lunch yesterday, and she has been struggling with the amount of stress she's been getting from work. And she kind of iterated that same sentiment that, well, the job pays the bills and it does it well enough that I get the freedom to go do the things that I want to do. So I'm not going to leave it, but it's really, really hard and I really don't like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, you should find a way to reframe it, even if it's not the most like logical or
the way that I like, so just to give an example, if like your friend was listening right now, I had a job right out of college, paid the bills, really cool spot around the country. I left it because it was so stressful. I didn't care about the pay. I didn't care about the external benefits that it provided for me, or just the security. And then, I found another job, lost that. And then eventually I found a job in traditional finance that promised a pretty secure external outcome, right? Like good money, good benefits. You're working in finance, so you're near the money, right? So, but it didn't provide fulfillment. I left that job. So twice I've left 2 jobs that provided a pretty secure route. I was making the right connections. There was a good actual salary and benefits ahead and presently for one of them. I still left because I was like, fuck this. I don't feel fulfilled. And it wasn't easy, but I did. Like, you can do it. You definitely can do it. And there's so many fucking jobs out there. Based off of what I'm seeing, it's a little, okay, maybe it's a little bit more difficult right now with the recession and some companies laying people off. But like for the current company I work for now, I took a downgrade in my pay because I loved the company. I knew it was going to be, and it's still to this day, it's very fulfilling. And eventually it's going to provide more and more external security, right? It's a startup, it's beginning, but I've gotten to a place where I love life every single day of the week and I feel fulfilled almost every single day. And it's because of, this company that I work for is really helpful because of what it provides. But if you're working for a company that gives you a decent salary for you to go do other things, and you're kind of weighing on, oh man, I can't wait for Friday, can't wait for the weekend. That's not living life to the fullest, in my opinion. And there's definitely routes that you can take to be able to optimally be every single day of the week. I mean, everybody's going to have challenges and obstacles, but every single day of the week, like with your career, or if you're an entrepreneur with your company that you're building, there's ways to construct it nowadays. We have so many tools. to be able to have external security, but also internal fulfillment through what that company is providing. So to your friend, I think like ultimately, how long do you want to continuously, because stress is, I was talking to a couple other guests previously, but stress is like the number one ager. You want to live a long life, but you're stressed at your job. Good luck. I mean, depending on how stressed you're getting to, but
and it takes that initiative though. So like,
yeah.
like you said, we each have strong curiosities. We like to explore things. That we have a certain trust in ourselves that if we do jump ship, we're going to be able to make something
figure
work.
it out.
There's that optimism there.
But the first time doing that, I don't know about you, but for me, it was fucking terrifying. So I get it. But then once you take that leap and you trust yourself more, you're able to, you can adjust those if you want. You got it. Okay. You can click that. Yeah. Like once you take that first leap, you're able to, you have more confidence in yourself to be able to do it again if you had to. So I understand that it could be terrifying at first.
Especially when you're coming from not a full cup.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of depressed. You're in a low state.
Yeah.
There's not the energy levels to,
great point.
To
bend
the legs and leap. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, well, things, bills are paid right now. I need to take care of number one first.
Yeah.
And find those things. But if you can't do that, then the first thing is what you have control over, which is like mind and attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to reframe and pivot a viewpoint on a subject or a viewpoint on anything is a superpower.
Yeah.
Like if you can, this kind of goes into Joe Dispenza and some of that.
Yeah.
That work that mentality is the first thing that you have physical control over and can alter your current reality like a light switch. And I was reading a book by Bruce Lee's daughter, and he had this quote in there where talked about that you can develop faith.
Yeah.
And that you can, I forget how he phrased faith, but then he said that you can build faith through repeated instructions to the subconscious. So basically using mantras or things like that. And he said this is the voluntary development of the emotion of faith. And so being able to construct uplifting things when you're in a not 100% state, or feeling the best about a certain subject, what is a frame that you could take that could empower you, give you more power in the situation and control? And then even if you don't believe it yet, take time every day to kind of close the eyes and change that reality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. You can repeat certain mantras or certain mental instructions, statements, concepts that can give you the power, the embodiment of elevated emotions that can bring you forth in a stronger position in physical reality. And that's kind of something I did too. When I took that first leap, I was able to, I was lucky. My parents were able to help me with the external shelter, food and whatnot. And I had enough money in my bank account, but that's the first thing I started to focus on was like mental, emotional, just getting out of this kind of pocket of, maybe a lower state. And that propelled me forward to be able to like figure things out. So it's not easy for sure.
Definitely not. But I'm curious. So reading Becoming Supernatural, Joe Dispenza can get pretty lofty and deep. And I find some people overuse buzzwords like quantum and things like that, where now if you say, oh, by proving that two atoms can be in separate places and affecting one immediately affects the other, if this is true, then you can like they just jump into saying that you can do anything basically.
Yeah.
Makes it feel not super practical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about, while reading that book, what kind of exercises you've found or that have kind of like sat with you.
Yeah, so I'm still not done with the book, so I think in chapter 7, but a few practices. Um, One that the first that comes to mind is his blessings of the energy centers meditation. And it was effective for me directly after my ayahuasca experience, because the experience that I went through with the ayahuasca ceremonies was, it's a psychedelic, pretty magical experience where you have these emotional activations, physical, like actual physical sensations, visionary, all these different sensual activations, and one of them in the ayahuasca ceremonies was just feeling in different energy centers, which I prior to ayahuasca I didn't have any belief in chakras or energy centers. Kind of waved it off as mystical woo woo stuff. Now that's kind of been changed. Perspective on that has changed. I do like calling them, at least while I'm in the US, I like calling them the energy centers, because the way that Joe Dispenza talks about them, he gets scientific with it. He gets granular with describing each energy center having glands, having hormones, having different. He gets into the human anatomy aspect to then discuss how you mentally and emotionally, if you're blocking things, like let's say, if a child was sexually abused when they were younger, they hold all of that into their lower energy centers. And it's very interesting to, at least with the ayahuasca ceremony, I had different activations there, right? And it provided like a lot of healing, a lot of different elevated degrees of emotions. And when I came back, you're back in the busyness of being in the United States, your job, going to the gym, friends, relationships. Your ego comes back more not aggressively, but more. After being in Costa Rica, grounded, and you have no responsibilities, you're just kind of you're pretty present. You're really grounded. And so coming back, I wanted to keep the momentum in place or intact somewhat. And so this meditation where it's just like 45 minutes, and he discusses like where your attention is where your energy is. And so you just go through the 8 energy centers. The first 2 times I did it, the same thing happened to me. The same thing as what occurred during the first ayahuasca ceremony. I started laughing. I started cracking up. I started having a lot of joy. And so I did that twice, where I focus on each energy center and you bless it for its greater good. And I know how that sounds for people. Like you're focusing on 7 or 8 places in your body and blessing it for the greater good. But when you actually mentally focus on a specific part of your body, the space within your body and then around it, and it was interesting because like all I can say is that I walked away each time doing it where I have like a little bit of for most of my life, this energy center, which is right in your throat, it gets choked up if you're in, that's why people choke up when they're doing a speech, if they're fearful or whatever, or if it's just a conversation that's uncomfortable. That has been an energy center or just a kind of familiar feeling I've had for most of my life since I was a little kid. Like it gets choked up in certain circumstances. And so doing this guided meditation where I'm like focusing on all these energy centers and just relaxing, being present and placing my attention on these parts of my body, I've walked away both times where it goes away, which is, and he discusses in the book how the first 3 energy centers are what could be blocking the remainder. Mm-hmm. And so that's one behavioral change that I've made in my day to day since I've been back from the ayahuasca ceremony, but also reading Joe Dispenza has provided a more clear understanding of why this is important, why meditation is so important. And it's a challenge to discuss it with people. At least here in Austin, it's been easy because I have friends like you and friends like other friends that can receive it and be like, yeah, I know what you're saying. I totally understand. But if I were to go home with other friends back in Massachusetts or some other area of the United States where it's much more secular, rational, materialistic, they look at that like, you're nuts. You're in a total different reality than other people. So
the first time I had chakras make sense to me was because same. I was like, okay, what do you mean? Areas of the body where these things, that specific emotions get stored, and why is fear in the liver? Why are these things here? My friend's cat, she went on vacation for a few days, and when she came back, her cat was peeing blood, and she's like, oh, cats experience that fear of missing the owner in their kidneys.
Oh.
And so when you have like a repeated thought loop, a consistent, so whether you have a consistent fear around money or a consistent fear around relationships or consistent self-confidence issues or other things, we carry that stress in a different spot.
Yeah.
And it leads proteins to not be made optimally, which then leads to the hormones not getting produced, which then leads to malfunction in a certain area.
Yeah.
So like that is what made it very granular and like practical for me.
And I think anybody that's the example I always use or over the course of the past couple episodes is U.S. citizens that have that materialistic viewpoint. When you're able to conceptualize it and break it down from a biochemical viewpoint, then they can say, whoa, if I'm so fearful about not making my next rent payment, well, what happens? Well, your thought, your fear activates certain stress hormones, and that if it's repeated aggressively over and over and over, it hinders certain parts of your body. I'm not one to be able to describe it as good as Joe Dispenza or even you, but I want to get better at being able to describe that. But like when you're able to break that down, like from a biological and chemical viewpoint, and tie that with the mental processes that you have and the emotional states that you're so used to having, it's very effective. And so to answer your question simply, that breakdown of biology, chemistry, tying it in with mental and emotional, Joe Dispenza does a really good job with that and provides like maybe this isn't really mysticism. This is actually something that's a relationship within the human body and mind that we have dismissed for so long. It's been present probably thousands of years ago, but since this hyperbolic advancement of industrialization and technology, we've just lost that inward value and practice, and we're so reliant on external things.
And people want we have computers now. We got bigger problems and ways of identifying things. So when you start talking about a religion from 1,000 years ago that had certain practices, it's like, yeah, well, they didn't have Google. So, one guy was able to make something up. And then if you get enough people to believe it, kind of like Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo.
Yeah.
I think it's the name of it. But
I think so.
If you believe something, you can create physiological changes from the belief that the sugar pill is now actually a medicine. They've shown that they'll give someone an upper, but they'll tell them it's a downer, and their body will relax and they'll go to sleep. And the other way around too. They'll give you a sedative, but they'll tell you that it's an upper, and you'll release adrenaline, and you can.
Yeah.
Now it's not for everybody and every time, because certain people have different trust levels with what they're receiving and what they're getting. But
that's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's
incredible. It's a superpower.
Yeah.
Like the ability to believe in something strongly is a superpower.
Of course, it could be a double-edged sword as well.
For sure.
But if you're able to be disciplined and trained in the power of belief, man, pretty incredible.
Yeah. I love the concept of superpowers
Yeah.
and like things that we actually have access to that you can do.
Yeah.
I used to host these dinners called Sushi and Superpowers. I'd invite people.
Did you
over.
really?
Yeah.
What was this?
Last year when I was back in
Austin, or?
Yeah, in Austin. I'd have like a buffet of like ingredients and we'd all roll sushi and put it together. And then I'd have like one superpower for the night that I would kind of like facilitate some discussion around.
Give me one example.
Like visualization.
Okay.
So, and I really
sushi and soup. I love it. That's awesome. Can you do it again? Can you bring it back?
I think I'm gonna. I really want to. I want to start hosting more things at my house.
Can I get an invite?
Yes.
Let's go.
Yes. First one. Get off maybe sushi superpower Sunday. But so like visualization, my mom used to always tell me playing basketball, like you're at the free throw line, you're about to shoot it, like you get 10 seconds. Take the first 5 and visualize it going in a few times before that. And I would just write her off as crazy. I was like, no, I'm gonna do my routine and do whatever.
Physical,
But I've been playing disc golf in Austin and like I was like, okay, I'm gonna work on visualization and see if doing that future, that mental rep. And Joe Dispenza's big thing is that the body doesn't know the difference between mental reps and physical reps. And so
he goes through that too, which is crazy. The examples that he goes through, like actual muscles growing in the arms and they weren't even doing.
Yep.
They were thinking about it.
Built it by like 13%.
Crazy.
And that's the extreme end of like, okay, well, what if you actually just spent that time lifting the muscle? What's the difference in it? But sometimes you don't have access to the gym or whatever. You can do these things. But before I would throw the disc golf, I would close my eyes and I'm just looking at the course. So other people are going and I would just like look at the line and I'd close my eyes and just visualize what a hole in one, like throw the disc. And I'd do that like 3 times. Then I'd open my eyes and I'd look at the fairway and I'd see the line of it and then kind of make the motion with my arm a few times. And I started having the best throws, like fairly consistently. And it doesn't work every single time, but if you can boost your performance by like 80% with a 1-minute practice, that's a superpower.
Yeah. I've actually, I think I told you I play disc golf, not as much now, but I started playing when I was a teenager, like 16 years old. And I've had 1 ace, maybe 2.
Jesus Christ.
Just 1. And it was a pretty difficult hole. It was in the woods, a lot of trees, but there's this one narrow pathway where I flick it up there. But I was pretty good. I was pretty accurate with my flick. And I
sounds like as accurate as you could be if you're putting it in the hole.
Well, I only got it 1. I got 1 ace, but I was pretty good though at just placing it where I needed to place it. I would even flick a putter a lot because it just goes straight. There's no tail. And I'd flick the putter and play catch with my friends. And they were just like, dude, how are you doing this? Like I just look at them and I just visualize it. Like, I think the automatic thing I would do prior to releasing the disc is visualize it.
Yeah.
It was an automatic thing that I would do. And then if I wasn't present and I didn't visualize, like if the thought of this is going to be a bad one came up, it would be pretty bad. It's pretty interesting how if you don't have confidence in the visualization of where it's going to go, your plan, it just, you fucking knock a tree.
So it's amazing that, by doing your little side hobbies and the other things, you find these kind of like meta skills and then how they apply to other areas. So then as I got into trying to learn how to build apps or do certain things, I realized that every time I had tried it, I'd hit a certain wall. I'd hit a problem. I'd Google it for a little bit and I'd get upset and just like get up and go make food or like do something else. Like I would get away from it to the point to where I started to expect those blockers and that's what I was going to run into. And so after discovering the visualization with disc golf, I started bringing it back. I'm like, okay, well, why don't I expect success in the other problems that I'm facing and how to do this? And then visualizing, okay, like running into the problem, stay in the seat and work through it, but like keep the elevated emotions, keep the physical, positive attitude towards it. And then coming back to, so like we all want the data to track how elevated emotions make sense and why it's beneficial. And I ran into someone at Zilker. I was watching some friends play sand volleyball and they're playing and one of their other friends was standing by me. And just like introduced myself to him and then kind of like asked him what he likes to do and what he's about. And he's saying that he's diving into self-help books and philosophy and some certain things. And I was like, oh, well, let me, like, you heard anything lately that kind of excited you? And he mentioned this book, Heart Intelligence, which is from the Heart Math Institute, which Joe Dispenza
There's
constantly
a chapter
references.
called Heart Intelligence, and I'm actually on that chapter.
Well, perfect. And he explained this one concept that they would, and this one still kind of like rattles me, and I don't fully know how this happened or works or if it's been tested again, but that they would, participants would be staring at a blank screen, and then an image would flash after 4 seconds, an image would flash for 6 seconds, and then it would go blank for 10 seconds. And the image would either be emotionally provoking, positive, negative, or neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And they would wear this monitor that measures as you inhale, your heart rate elevates slightly.
Mm-hmm.
As you exhale, it goes down. If you're thinking or viewing positive emotions or elevated emotions, the peaks and the valleys are consistent. And that means that your body is in a safe state,
Okay.
which happens when you're in deep sleep. It happens in rest. And with the images, the heart would have a response before a random image came up, which in a linear sense of chronological time doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that like blew me away. And I was like, what is this book? Like, I'm ordering this book. So I bought the book, read it, still don't know how I feel about that piece of it. But they would do these other tests where they take 4 people and sit them down at a table and blindfold them all. And they'd put that monitor on each of them. And they'd have 3 of the people focus on an elevated emotion of love, joy, bliss, motivation, inspiration, one of them. And as their heart rates, as the heart rate variability started to smooth out, the 4th person, no one's talking, no one's saying anything, the 4th person's heart would come into coherence as well. And then they did the same thing, but with not elevated emotions, but low vibe emotions. So anxiety, grief, worry. And then this causes the peaks and the valleys to kind of be all over the place. And the same thing would happen, that as 3 people started to get an erratic heart rate, the 4th person would.
And so there's no, I'm just trying to visualize this experiment. The people in the room that are blindfolded, the 3, and then the 1 individual, are they hearing anything? Or they're just sitting silently?
No, sitting silently and breathing softly. So it's not like you're doing like a very activating breath of like.
So yeah. Quickly. So what that means, and Joe Dispenza discusses this, and I was mentioning this outside, off the mic, that there's actual there's electricity going on in your brain when you're thinking, and there's the neuron, the patterns of your neurons assembling for whenever you're thinking, and then your emotions and your heart. There's a magnetic, I don't know if it's a vibration, but it's a magnetic vibration. So I could totally understand if that person, even though they can't consciously receive what's actually happening within the hearts and minds of those other 3 people, there's an invisible field. And that's what Joe Dispenza talks about. There's an invisible field of energy that we create. And once again, a U.S. citizen would think that's fucking crazy, but it's being proven scientifically. So yeah, and I mean that, like, having that information scale and scale and scale, I can totally see why I don't know, institutions and governments wouldn't want, like, they don't want,
Well, it's hard to sell. It's not a pill. It's not, there's no product to sell with it. And then people still might hear this and think, okay, what's the practical application of that? Like, do I need to sit around a group of people and like get everyone to think positive emotions? Mm-hmm. But in how I use it in practice is just for me personally, that the only other time that you can get in that smooth, not the only other time, but the only other times that you're consistently in that state is when you're sleeping. And so Andrew Huberman's been talking lately about this concept of non-sleep deep rest, that how to get in that coherent state without going to sleep. And one of them is focusing on elevated emotions. So I bought one of the monitors. It's called the Inner Balance Monitor from the Heart Math Institute. And you clip it on your ear and it measures your heart rate as you in a very granular level, so that you can tell the difference in inhales and exhales. And I'll facilitate meditations for people where I'll kind of just prompt different memories associated to different emotions. Like, think of a time that you were a child and you felt like the joy of, like with friends and you guys were all playing a certain game, or think of a time that you were with your family and you felt just like unconditional love, or think of a time that you gave a gift to someone and it was received really well and they felt seen, and you get this tickle. You get this tickle of an emotion. And then I tell them before the meditation, like when you feel that tickle, imagine you have a dial and amplify it, like just crank up the dial. And that works. And the first time I actually learned that, of like amplifying an emotion just by like thinking of it, was Delaney at one of the comfort zone retreats. He was facilitating a journal exercise and visualizing the future self. And he's like, "Hey, that feels good. Yeah, crank the dial." And it does. I'm like, "Oh shit, I feel better." Like it's crazy that you can just do that. But then after the meditation, like I see on my phone when they're getting into these high states of coherence, when they're feeling like the safest, the most blissed out. And I'll ask them about, okay, so it was kind of around the time I was talking about a memory with a loved one. But and they'll talk about it a little bit. And I was like, okay, know that you have a strong access to that emotion with that memory. So if you're in a state where you're stressed out, or you're in a place where you want to relax, or like you need to, like you want to lay down and take a nap, like you need rest, lay down and focus on that feeling and that tickle and crank the dial.
And so one of the more effective meditative instruction that you gave was being with a loved one.
Yeah.
Or one of them.
Yeah.
So this is what blows my mind. The first thing that comes to my mind, not to go down a negative route, but like COVID. It's like, told everybody to separate. Can't see your grandmother for 3 years. Have to hug them through a plastic sheet. Just breaks my heart, dude. Because it's like you take what we've been talking about and you understand that there's more information to help the human experience. And the past few years was just the direct opposite of like what can make us stronger,
And another crazy little piece about it was I was facilitating this meditation at one of the retreats that I was cooking for. And when I asked, it was for a group, but one guy had the monitor on. And I was like, if you don't mind sharing, like when I was talking about this experience with the parents, it was your highest state. And he's like, that's funny because like I have a really rough relationship with them. And I was expecting that it would dip. But he felt compassion for his mom in that moment instead. And compassion is one of the highest elevated emotions. So even if, and you can have compassion for other people or compassion for yourself. So if you're going through these meditations or you're thinking of time and place or people that irk you or have, a sticky relationship, if you can find the angle to look at it, where you can have compassion for them for thinking that they were trying their best, or that, even these people in a government situation where they're making the rules and facilitating these things and enforcing different policies, it's like, you know what? They're looking out for themselves, and they're worried about their mini castles, like their home and their relationships and their sponsorships or their fundraising from different things.
Yeah.
I like to believe that people aren't inherently evil.
Yeah.
And they might be, but if there's a way that you can reframe it and look at it as in, they've got kids or something like that, and you can just like feel sorry that they have to be not sorry, but compassionate in a way.
It's a great way to
soften if you have like anger, if you're triggered by something.
It's a great way to frame it, and reminds me of a part of the conversation that I had with Coach Bray. And he was talking about how he just can't believe within him that people are evil, that people are like inherently evil. He thinks that they're unhealthy and they've been directed within the start of their life and then ongoingly to just in an unhealthy manner.
It's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah. And so I totally understand that. And sometimes I see things that happen in modern day society that really, it's hard for me to believe that people aren't inherently evil, because there's certain rabbit holes, man, and some of them are not fun to go down. It's really dark.
It's real dark. My mom went deep down QAnon hole.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just like laugh at a lot of those conspiracies and
QAnon,
things like
yeah.
that. But the base level of it is that there is a global like sex trafficking trade with children that get
Mhm.
kidnapped and
Yeah, I mean,
doing these things, and that's real. And now then they start to draw lines and then connect this trade to people in power and like make connections that
yeah,
you
man,
know it's a small likelihood of certain probabilities, but it's
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 scary.
about as evil as it can get.
Yeah. And so that's where I like I question inherent evil. And so I still think I'm with you on there and with Bray that I don't believe people are inherently evil. I think that that's the worst of the worst right there in human modern day society, right? And how it started was the progression of uh our governments, institutions, and agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and this constant Cold War, if you will, if you want to call it Cold War of information and power structures. Those were, I mean, information, having the correct information, that's the real war. During like physical World War II, like physical battles, World War II, World War One, whatever it may be, but having the correct information, the right information is uh, what wins wars. And so there's a book. I have two books. Haven't read them. I bought them before my ayahuasca ceremony, like months before, because I was kind of in this mind space. But I started realizing it was making me depressed. So I haven't read them, and I probably will. But it's by Whitney Webb, and it's volume 1 and volume 2 of One Nation Under Blackmail. And she dives deep into the progression of FBI, CIA, and how it's accelerated into blackmailing different very powerful people of different nations in order to gain information and to hold them through that blackmail to an extent that provides the adversary more information. And so that just carried on. I think that cycle carried on for so long that Jeffrey Epstein just seems kind of obvious to me. Like he was just doing this for so long for different power entities, organizations. It got way blown out of proportion to an extent that it's like satanic. And
just to kind of add in, I'm not saying that there aren't evil people out there.
yeah,
I fully believe
like
in evil. I'm just for your own
when they first are
good,
born.
for your own good and safety.
Yeah.
Like my mom, I would wake up and come downstairs and she'd just be bawling, crying. She'd be torn up reading these different articles on some of these really dark things. So I break it down kind of into the point of if someone cuts you off in traffic, that person might be a fucking asshole. Like they could be a dick. They could be
Mhm.
power tripping, thinking their life is more important, all this stuff, whatever. And that can anger you that someone else has that stance of the world that they think they're more important than anyone else here, like
Mhm.
all these things. But if you can reframe it to being like, maybe they're rushing late, like they just got some horrible, like maybe they just found out their son, something horrible happened and they need to get somewhere like,
Or it's a physical thing, like while they're driving.
yeah, that can bring you peace. And that's kind of the goal. It's
Mhm.
like more, like you said, stress is the biggest ager. If you can find these little games of lowering your stress and like, I don't want to go to the length of, oh, now you just forgive everybody for everything ever. No, but you can take a way that doesn't make you sit and wallow
Mhm.
on shitty things that are happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the game. It's the balance. It's understanding like, yeah, you're not gonna just because a part of me is like, the reason why I got into it was because I got into Bitcoin. I got into the rabbit hole of money, and then that gets into everything. And money is information. Money is your ability to peacefully maybe interact. It is a peaceful technology, a technology to provide a peaceful exchange, a medium of exchange. And money, if you follow the money, if you have a track history of the money, you can understand what really happened in history. Because all the history books, they ain't telling you all the fun facts, bro. Uh, and so that led me to understand Bitcoin better because it seems to be a repetitive or just a trend for most people. They're just trying to fill their own cup. Can I make a good buck on this? But what's amazing at that, it just it starts off with a personal gain, so I can have a monetary gain, capital gain, but then you just start going down this rabbit hole of history. And then that led to what's the biggest threat now for us, for human society? Because that's when I saw COVID, I thought of this is a threat, right? For most people. And most people think the virus is the threat. But for me and other people within some circles that I'm in, it's not just necessarily the virus. It's organizations, it's government entities that, So the way that they reacted, the way that they responded to this pandemic was just discussing, very detrimental to all of our health, all of our lives, all of our emotional states. It was terrible. I mean, it was so obvious for me. Like if you're in tune with your emotions and you see what different government officials or politicians are saying, it's just like, wow, you are so off from human nature and peace and just a stride towards a better world. The way that you're responding to this pandemic,
and it doesn't hurt when there's other incentives aligned with those things of poor health. There's a lot of incentives for poor health when it comes to big agriculture, big pharma, like Monsanto. You want to spray these chemicals, you want to do these things, you want to enforce these prescriptions, enforce these vaccines. There's dollars tied to it. Yeah. And those are some of the biggest funders of political organizations. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't hurt when the incentives align for them. Yeah.
And where I was getting with that, and the funny thing that I was going to comment on, the fact that like sometimes you can forget about what we were talking about, because we've gone everywhere right now, right? But when you go down that rabbit hole like your mom did or like I did, you lose track of just where you started. Why did you initially get into this? Because it's just so like naturally curious. And then it's a never ending, just continuous amount of information of like, what is going on with this trafficking, sex trafficking? And it's like, naturally as a good human being, as a peaceful human being that has compassion, you like want to help with preventing this from happening. So you just keep learning more. In the process, it's deteriorating your emotions. It's deteriorating your physical health.
Especially if you're not physically contributing to, your actions are not making progress that makes you feel better about the situation.
Right.
So I had to have that conversation with my mom too and say,
was that helpful?
She's still pretty hyper conspiratorial about a lot of things, but I was telling her, I was like, hey, if you want to feel better about it, then you need to spend some of this energy investigating it, either raising awareness or contributing to a solution. Because if you just want to spend all of your time staring at problems, you're tearing yourself apart.
Yeah, for sure. And how did we get into QAnon and
elevated emotions?
Elevated emotions. Yeah. So we're definitely gonna bring back sushi Sundays and superpowers, but I want to get into some of your personal stories. So, I mean, you just got back from the Netherlands. You were in Europe for a little bit, for a while, a few months, and it seems like you've done multiple retreat-like experiences that would be expressed in this podcast endeavor that you're looking to do. So if you have any stories that come top of mind to talk about, to share.
Yes, I'll kind of give context to the travels. So last year, I reached the end of my contract with consulting on a certain project and had planned on taking a sabbatical. And like I always had this dream that I was going to live in Europe for a year. But when I got out of a 5-year relationship that I was in, I was like, okay, like Europe is the next stop. But then I visited Austin and fell in love with the people in the community. And I just did like a 3-month sublease over the summer of, I think, 21.
Mm-hmm. So we met, or we might have met
in the fall of 21, maybe November. So I did a 3-month sublease, left for a month, traveled, did that first breathwork retreat in the Netherlands. And I came back and did a 6-month lease. And then it was coming to the end of that. I was coming to the end of that contract. with consulting, and I was like, I need to just take a sabbatical, and I need to go scratch this Europe itch before I get locked into Austin, because Austin is now home. And so I planned a few different stops with around retreats, and had a friend getting married in India in September. So I'm like, okay, I've got a few waypoints. And the first one was a songwriting workshop in Norway, which was really interesting to get the experience of someone who produces music professionally. The first day was all about, if you're stuck writing songs, if you show up in a studio and you need, you've got a few hours, you need to write songs, what are some exercises you can do to kind of break down stimulating creativity and taking someone else's music, finding the melody in it. Okay, well, they added an inflection here. What if you dropped it down instead? Like, how can you take things and just tweak them a little bit just to get your juices flowing? And how to work with certain rhyme structures, and how to add hooks in, because the brain is this pattern recognition machine that releases dopamine when it figures out the pattern, and then it gets it right when it hears it later. And so they talked about ABBA being like the kings of this. Like, they're like, you want to find a band that mastered hooks, and like,
it's called ABBA.
ABBA, ABBA.
Look it up right now.
I don't know what European country they're from, but by the time the chorus comes, you've heard like the melody like slipped in like 6 times. And so when the chorus comes, like, your brain is fully releasing dopamine.
Yeah.
Like, it's on for the ride. It knows what it's expecting, and it's receiving that too. But then the second day, you go into a studio and you break up into groups, and you sit in there for 8 hours, and you have to come up with a song. And like, one person is the artist. A lot of people there were actual artists on Spotify. So they like have songs that they're working on. They're, okay, I want to work on this thing. So then everyone else becomes kind of like a session musician, or like you're in there as a songwriter. And then you get a producer, and you're in this studio for 8 hours. And I didn't realize how goddamn hard it was to be a musician like that. And like, there's no windows in there. Like, you're sitting in the same chair, you're listening to the same pieces of the song over and over. You're like forcing creativity. It feels like it's not just coming naturally. You're like, okay, well, we got till 5 to get this thing fully produced and published and out there. And I've worked on, I play guitar, and I've been writing some of my own songs, and I've got songs that are half finished for years. Like,
same.
Yeah, I've got certain music. Yeah, it just doesn't. But when you give yourself that window, and you got these exercises to kind of play with, and be like, okay, this isn't working. Okay, well, let's grab one of those exercises from yesterday and roll with it. And by the end of the day, you have a fully produced song. It's not the best thing you've ever made, but it's version 1. And I love that concept of getting something out, getting something produced, like, especially in a creative endeavor where there's no finished project. You just decide you're done touching it.
Yeah.
And that can extend forever. And this is, part of the thing that I love about these retreats is that you learn these meta skills that can then be applied to other things. So for instance, me working on these websites that I'm trying to build, and that app I'm trying to build is like, this isn't the finished product. Like, just get version 1 done today, or version 2, or version 2.2. Like, it's just, and that's the beauty of technical production. It's like, if you're a carpenter, you're like, fuck that, dude. I'm not going to waste this wood trying to, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Like, that's my dad's favorite quote. So it works really well and applies well for this other area that I'm diving into, of building software. So that was cool. And then the other big thing that travel kind of teaches you, and this sabbatical taught me, was that shit doesn't go as planned, and it's not always fun. Especially if you do it alone, loneliness is real, and you got to find your hacks to get over loneliness. So right after that songwriting workshop, I was supposed to go. I found this guy that up in the north coast of Norway, Russia released king crabs into their northern sea, like in the 60s, and they proliferated. They had no predators. They scuttled over to Norway and were cutting all their fishing lines. And so then Norway said, okay, open fucking quota on getting king crabs. And now they're one of the biggest king crab like exporters in the world. And I was like, okay. And then one guy was offering like an excursion where you can go on his boat and catch these crabs, and like all you can eat king crab. And I was like, fuck yes, sign me up. Sign me the fuck up for that. But in Europe, everyone goes on strike. Strikes are just a fucking thing. So the pilots went on strike. I couldn't fly up north. It would have taken me like 36 hours to drive from where I was. I would have to go through Finland and get up there. So instead, I just rented a car and drove to the West Coast and drove back. And some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my life, but experiencing it alone, if you don't have the right mindset, is depressing as hell. Like, yeah, you're just driving on this highway and there's like crazy waterfalls and I'm pulling over and flying the drone and then just like getting back in my car. I'm like, oh, that was cool. All right, I'll go to the next one.
So just real quick, at the story night at your place, Alexander, he presented, he did his own thing like on stage, but when we did,
he did his own thing.
He definitely did his own thing. But when we did the breakout groups, he was within the second one, I think, or the first one. But he mentioned that. He said he was immersed into beautiful geographic places within the world, but he was by himself. So the emotions that generated in these beautiful areas were depressive or negative. And it's interesting how, yeah, you could be in a shit fucking part of the world, but still it's all dependent on your internal state. And I mean, going back to what we were discussing, like you have the ability to, shape your mind, your framework in those scenarios. And, but yeah, it was just a comment because he said the same thing. And I haven't really experienced that because I haven't really done a backpacking trip on my own.
I was in that session with you. Yeah, he said he was in this like villa in Bali, and he's like, no, you're good. And he was having this cocktail, and he's like, I'm in the most beautiful place in the world, like with all the things that I could want, and it just amplifies the loneliness because all you want to do is turn to someone next to you and have them acknowledge how beautiful it is.
Yeah,
and then you guys can laugh about it. You can do these things, and so this amplifies. Keep saying the word amplify. The power of community and like the absence of it. Like when you don't have community and when you don't have like connection with other people, it's you could have everything. You could have like the objective, most incredible experience, but it is, what's it worth? Like I would have rather been, like when I went to India and was in like sitting on the floor with this tour guide and we're just like playing cards and like laughing and like they're just gambling and saying shit. It's like that made me like laugh and enjoy and like just like enjoy being there with someone else and experiencing something.
You could almost say in comparison to the experience of being alone in the most amazing part of Sweden or Norway. The elevated emotions while gambling in a house with Indians was better, was more positive and more powerful.
If I had that fucking monitor on, I would have been in a way better state sitting with them on the floor, like just smoking cigarettes and they're drinking rum and we're just like we're in the dirtiest place you could be and like my asthma's getting kicked up and like all this stuff, but like my body felt welcome and like I could add value to the group versus just driving alone and just, feels like, just doing it to do it, which is never a good reason to do something. But I did hear, I was listening to the other day, they're talking about, they're like, doing something because you want to is maybe the only reason you need. But then you learn what you actually want. So if you do things that you thought you wanted, like I thought I wanted to drive across Norway and do these things and have that European sabbatical, or sabbatical, I'd ended up in India. Was supposed to go to New Zealand, but flights and shit got things go wrong. I thought that's what I wanted, and then I realized that it wasn't, and that I realized I had to do the whole fucking thing again if I want to actually scratch that itch. But so then I learned, I want to stay in a place for at least 2.5 weeks, like each location, like being so transient and just constantly unpacking the suitcase and then having to pack it all up. And it's like, all right, you know what? Next place I go, I'm not unpacking. Like I'm going to leave everything in there. And then, you're just sleeping in cars and just isolated. So if you do that backpacking stuff, like that's why hostels are, that's my like requirement. If I'm going to do any solo travel again, it's like, yeah, sure. Every now and then treat yourself to a solo room or an Airbnb, but you have to actively engage in community in order to feel
the vibe of the environment of that part of the world.
Just to feel good.
Yeah.
Like unless you're intentionally unplugging and getting away from, like if you've been too immersed with contact and communication and stuff like that, then it's an intentional isolation. Then that feels good because you're intentionally unplugging. But yeah, that was another big takeaway for me during the trips. The other big learning experience was the Vipassana. So I had just got done with this, my friend's wedding in India. It was which is just a crazy experience. Like 3 nights of just festivals and music and like perform dances from people in like the bridal party and the group. Like they just have this whole thing, and it's amazing. It's incredible how, not how serious they take it, but how well they celebrate a wedding. It's really, really incredible. And then right after that was doing a Vipassana, a 10-day silent retreat, because I was like, okay, well, I wanted to do a 10-day, I wanted to do a Vipassana. First time I heard about it, I looked at it, I'm like, oh, it's free. You can do them anywhere in the world. And I was back in Chicago. I'm like, oh, there's a place in Western Illinois in the middle of nowhere, and you can do it there. I'm like, I don't want to be in Western Illinois and just like do this thing. So like, oh, I'm going to go to an exotic place. And I went to Bodh Gaya, which is like the home of Buddhism. And I was like, okay, like it's a religious pilgrimage center. So I'm assuming that the place is going to be nice, and there's going to be like nice stuff to look at, and just, it'll feel like a total spiritual ego. Like it'll be a deeper, better experience for sure. And I showed up, and it was dirty. It was rough. There was like sleeping on a cot. That is the most uncomfortable thing you've ever seen. There's just bugs everywhere, mosquitoes. I didn't get a malaria shot, so I was like a little bit heightened. You're not supposed to kill anything on a Vipassana. That's like one of the rules. So I'm like, mosquitoes, they're like not in the hall, is what like some other one, like a guy who had done a Vipassana told me. I'm like, dude, if a mosquito lands on me, I'm killing that thing. Not just gonna receive that
malaria.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me receive this.
Like if you're elevated emotion enough,
you won't get malaria.
Malaria is not a thing. But the first day, and for a little bit more context, before I went to the wedding, I was at this movement mentorship for a full week. It was like 8 hours of learning different like balance and stretching and animal movements and proprioception games and all this stuff. So I was like very in tune with my body. And that first day at the meditation retreat, like you show up in the evening, and then the silence starts that night, and then you wake up the next day and you go through a full day of meditation. And they're like an hour and a half to 2 hours per meditation block. And you're sitting on the ground, and you listen to a recording in the morning, and you watch a video at night of the guy who, I don't know, some teacher. And he says that this is hard on the body, and if you need to take a break, like you can lay down, but no longer than 5 minutes. Otherwise, the meditation hall becomes a snoring hall. So I heard that as I can lay down for 5 minutes. And I'm sitting there, hour and a half in. I'm like, all right, my back hurts. Like I'm going to lean back and lie down. And as soon as my head touched the floor, someone came over and just like shook my mat. Like sit the fuck up, basically. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Thought I got some time. So sat there just like in pain the rest of the day, kind of like trying, you're shifting positions. You're trying to find your spot. I did not do a whole bunch of like meditation prep. Like people say like, you should be able to sit for an hour, like comfortably without having to do all that. I was doing like maybe like 10-minute meditations during the day or 20 minutes and like just shifting the whole time. So, and it just did that whole movement workshop where I'm like doing like spinal waves and like trying to stay a little bit loose in there. And then at night you watch the video. In the video, the teacher says the same thing. He's like, yeah, like he's like, this is hard on the body. Like if you need to rest, you can take 5 minutes to lay down. then after the video, you do a meditation at night, and then they open up for like questions to the teacher. And you can get in line and like, ask a question, say what you're struggling with. And I just went up to him and was like, hey, like sitting on the ground for 12 hours a day is like hard on the human body. And I respectfully asked for 5 minutes, if like that's what I heard, to rest before someone tells me to sit up. And he's like, no, not in the meditation hall. And I was like, no, he said in the meditation hall, otherwise it becomes a snoring hall. Like that's verbatim. This dude said meditation hall. He's like, no, he didn't. You didn't listen. I'm like, you didn't listen.
You work here.
Yeah. And he's
you fucking see the video over and over again.
He's like, you didn't say that. I'm like, yes, he did. And then we just like ended at that like stalemate of like me being pissed off and him being like, that wasn't reality. I'm like, all right then. Okay. So I went back in my room.
I've seen this video 1,000 times. He didn't say that. What?
So then the next day I'm like, all right, if it doesn't say group meditation on that fucking schedule, I'm staying in my room. I'm going to lay the fuck down when I meditate. So the next morning, stayed in my room, and they sent someone in to get me. They like called them Tinkerbell, because these people they'd walk around with these bells. And like when they do that, that means you come to the meditation hall. And this guy comes and he like knocks on my door, and I open it, and he's like nodding me to, he's not speaking. And I was like, it doesn't say group meditation. Like I'm meditating in my room. He's like, come. So I walked with him to the schedule and pointed at the wall. I'm like, it doesn't say group meditation. He's like, just fucking tell me to shut the fuck up and get in the room. So I did. And then sitting there meditating the whole time, I'm like, first of all, the day before, this was September in like northern India. It was hot as fuck. And I would be fully sweating through my t-shirt by like 9 a.m. And the doors are open in this place, the windows, like there's just mosquitoes landing on me all the time. And I'm just like silently crushing them. And so I joined for this meditation that I told myself I wasn't going to be joining it. And I was just like, fuck this place. Like, I don't like how I'm being treated. Like and they tell you like no yoga, like no stretching. Like this is meditational torture. And I just was so against that. And so then, the rest of the day, anytime I didn't say group meditation, I was in my room and they'd come get me and I would just tell them no. And then at the end of the day, watched the video, and the video talked about like, I forget the word, but it's like all your actions should be not compassionate, but another word where it's like they do no harm to other people. Like the decisions you make and the actions you take, what makes them good is if they're not harming anybody. And I was like, and this dude's over here fucking lying about the goddamn words this dude's saying that are putting me in pain. All right, dude, like now I got firepower against you. Like I'm gonna call you out on that shit. And then the next day I wake up and I'm covered in these rashes. And they're just like down my arm and down my chest. And I'm like, okay, something's going on. And another thing I didn't know about India is that there's just like power outages constantly. Like they're just throughout the day, just super common. You have these things, which means the fan in the room shuts off at night. And then there's a fan in the bathroom that blows exhaust. And if that fan's off, now it's hot too. Now bugs are getting in. And I'd be like sleeping at night, like under this blanket, getting eaten alive and just not sleeping, basically, just like sweating and covered. And then power would come back on and you'd hear the fan start to go, and like you get these little fucking pump fakes where the fan would come on for like 5 seconds. You're like, oh, thank God. And then it would just die again. You're like, and I was convinced at one point during that second day, because I was staying in my room, that someone was coming over and killing the power on me. So I was like, I went downstairs and was like flipping switches on their circuit board, trying to get this power back. It was a mental game. But anyway, third day, I wake up, I'm covered in these rashes. They're sending people to my room to get me out because I'm meditating in my room. And I'm like, I'm not going in there. And I'm like, and do you have any type of medical person here that I can talk to about getting some type of cream or whatever? And they're like, you can talk to the teacher. And so I went.
Were you talking to people?
You can talk to helpers.
Okay, because my buddy Alex, I think he did. Might have been a
He
different.
said you could write
Write,
something,
yeah.
and you could write, especially if you needed like toothpaste or shampoo or whatever. Like you could write things down, and they would go order it. They said that we could talk to the helpers. So I found one guy, and yeah, I told him like, hey, like I need to talk to some type of medical person here. And they're like, you can talk to the teacher, but you're gonna have to wait till noon. I was like, no, dude, go talk to this guy. So I went and like sat in front of him and was like, hey, like I'm having. He's like, I know why you're here. Didn't acknowledge any of the medical stuff. He's like talking to me about doing my meditations in the room and all this other stuff. And I was like, sure. I'm having like some kind of reaction to something, and I need to know if I can get this looked at or something. And he goes, this is a mental issue, and you need to sit down and focus on because the whole instructions of Vipassana is that you're just supposed to concentrate on the feeling of air coming in and out of your nose. And every time your mind wanders, you come back to the sensation of air coming in and out of your nose. And he's like, it's so important that you do these meditations in the room, in the group hall, because you don't really understand like what the meditation is yet. Dude, I get it. To focus on my nose. I get it. Like I hear you. I gotcha. He's like, yeah, this is a mental issue. Like you need to sit down and it'll go away in 4 or 5 days. And I was like, what the fuck? And I'm like, is he right? Like, what is this? Okay. Like went and sat down. I thought about it for a good 5 minutes, and I got up and just left the room. I was like, you know what? This isn't the place for me. This is not the place for me. Went back to my room, packed up my stuff. They sent more people to try to get me to come back to the meditation hall. And I was like, no, I'm quitting. Like I'm done. This is it. Like I'm having some reaction. This guy's fucking gaslighting me, telling me it's a mental thing. Like realized that it was eczema because I had been sweating so much. My skin just was like drying out. It wasn't holding on. It wasn't holding on to any moisture. So after that meditation, like I went and talked to the teacher. I was like, hey, like I'm leaving. And I had a big kind of like ego trip about it where I'm like, I'm going to call this fucking guy out. Like so you're supposed to like kneel in front of the teacher when you're sitting. And I was like, walked up to him and just like stood in front of him. And he's like pointing at the thing on the ground. And I'm like, I'm not going to kneel for someone that lies to me. And his English sucks. So he's like looking at the other guy's like, what? And the other guy's like, I'm like, I'm not going to kneel because you lied to me. And they're like, they don't like,
yeah,
it didn't have the fucking delivery that I wanted to. And they're like, okay, grab a chair, dude. Like, and so they pulled up a chair and I sat in it and I was like, I'm like, you're not a medical doctor. You should give advice to nobody on like you've no idea what this is for me. And you're going to just have the fucking balls to tell me it's a mental issue. I'm like, this is eczema. I'm like, this place is too hot. I'm sweating. Like, I go, this isn't the meditation hall for me. And you're not the teacher for me. Like, he's like, he just fucking spiritual bypasses the shit out of this. He's like, there's so much heat in your body because the anger that you're feeling towards these things. I was like, whatever, dude. I'm leaving. Like my mind, he's like, you can stay and just like sleep in your room for the next few days. Like you don't have to come to the meditations. And I was like, no, dude, that room sucks. I'm getting eaten alive by bugs. Your power goes out every 2 fucking minutes. So I left and I go to, because they take a lot of your possessions and like put them in this vault. And so I go back and I'm like telling this guy, I'm like, hey, I'm leaving, like I need my stuff. He's like, did you talk to the teacher? I'm like, yes. He's like, where's your note? I'm like, I didn't get a note. Like I talked to him and I'm out of here. Like this is the thing. He's like, well, you need a note. And I was like, well, I'm like, well, when, like, cause now a meditation had started or was about to start. He's like, so you'll have to wait till 4 o'clock when you can talk to the teacher again. I'm like, you want me to sit around here for a few more hours? Like, and he goes, meditate. And I'm like, fuck you, dude. Fuck this place. So I walk back, go up there. I'm like, hey, he said I needed a note. Like, and he writes like you can leave because of a medical reason.
Yeah.
And he gave it to me and I gave it to the guy. And then they just fucking like, okay, see ya. And like take my suitcase and I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. I'm in the middle of like a kind of random street. I'm like, where can I find a taxi? They're like, guys, I just walked to the end of the road. So I'm dragging my suitcase down this dirt road, like 100 yards, just sweating so fucking hard. And I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going. I don't even know where I'm going to tell this taxi driver to take me. Like, so I walk back to the entrance spot and just like sit there and pull up my phone and like activate my data, and I start Googling like hotels and like what I'm gonna do for this next piece. And the guy who's handling like the exit process, like he doesn't speak any English. So I'm like, he's not helping me. I'm sitting there and another guy had just quit like an hour after me. And he walks up and he's like, "Oh, do you need help with the taxi?" And I was like, "Yes, like, dude, thank you." So he was Indian, but had worked in Houston for BP for a few years. So his English was super good. And he's like, "We'll share a cab into the city." He's like, and I had found a hotel and just like booked it. He's like, "I'll drop you off there." And I got out of the cab and just like people just kind of like their tour guides are ready there to just hound you basically to do something. And one of the guys' English was really good. So I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, where can I get food tonight?" Yada yada. He's like, "Okay, yeah, I'll find you." He like takes my bag, walks me into the hotel. He's like, "I'll meet you back in the lobby in like 20 minutes." I'm like, "No, dude. Like, I need to decompress. Like, all this shit's going on."
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, like, yeah, this tour guide then just ended up being this insane character, and he would just like drive me around on the back of his motorbike. This guy could like an extreme actor switch personalities and emotions like a light switch, to the instance where like we'd be walking and he's like talking to me about some temple and all this stuff, and then someone starts like coming up and begging me for something. He'd be like, you just scream like at them, like furrowed eyebrows, like angry so hard that the person like back, they're like, "What the fuck was that?" And then he'd just like come out, "Okay, yeah, this." Or we'd be talking and he's a just extremely devout Buddhist, like wants to become a monk. And if anyone mentioned anything about any other religion or something about Buddha, he would just instantly start crying. Like, "No one could be Buddha, man. No one could be Buddha. Buddha did so much." And all that. I'm like, no one's talking shit on Buddha, dude. Chill. But I've never experienced someone who could like, it was very manipulative in a sense, but he had never gone to any school. He like grew up in Nepal, like had no education or schooling, and just came to India and like loves Buddhism and would just take me to all these different temples. He took me to the cave that the Buddha meditated in for like, the story is that he meditated in this cave for I think like 6 years and 27 days and like fasted like in the cave. And there's
Buddha.
like, yeah. But this guy drinks and smokes and does all these things, and he wanted to become a monk, and which is where like he's got a wife and kids, but he's like, when I become a monk, like they're on their own, and I'm devoting the rest of my life to Buddha. I'm like, you think Buddha would want that? Like that seems like the most selfish thing you could do. He's like I've taken care of them for this. Like he's lived a really stressed out life and like doesn't want any responsibilities anymore. But there's an issue with a whole bunch of monks in India where they drink, they smoke, they gamble, all this stuff. And he was like, when I become a monk, I'm giving all this up and I'm just going to devote the rest of my life.
Funny you say that, because this actual monk right here, he's doing ketamine right now.
Like, dude, and yeah, it was an interesting exposure to my first time in India and seeing like the caste system that exists there.
Yeah, I've heard that's something that particularly comes to mind, is the caste system there.
Yeah.
How bad it can be. The poverty is pretty bad. And that guy's ability to emotionally switch left and right is most likely because he's trying to lead these divine tour guides for people that encompass spiritual information. It's a spiritual experience of like, this is a monastery or whatever, wherever you were going. But it's like going downtown Boston or going to New York City and you have homeless people begging you, but it's way worse.
It's worse because they believe that person was a piece of shit in a past life.
Really?
So they're an untouchable. They call them untouchables. And that this is reincarnation, and like because you were a fucking dick, you've reincarnated as an untouchable.
I haven't gotten into past lives. Something that came up from multiple people after my ayahuasca experience. I don't know what to think about it. I haven't done any research, so I can't say anything, to be honest. But
well, like we can have our own take on it. Like for me, it's like I think of it as our cell, like the water that you drink today is the same water that's existed on this planet the entire time. No new water has come other than the form of like or an iceberg or something like that. Asteroid. And our cells, in order to have gotten to this place, have gone through a crazy regeneration of millions of years that eventually ended up becoming some kind of primate and then like going down this line and this lineage. And I don't think I've ever been a human before, but like these cells have existed in some way, or like they have a historical relevance in other forms of carbon that have like gone through this process, or have like been from an animal that ate that thing, and then those cells got regenerated to become that other animal then got passed.
That's a very interesting way to look at it from like a more scientific view too. But yeah, the reincarnation, multiple incarnations, something I haven't done. I'm willing to do research on it, and that is a cool way to like start to understand the actual,
the physical,
the chemical
passing of it, and you can't really tie it back to anything specifically, but I think I've kind of like finished the ramble on the sabbatical and things
that was a great story. That was you made me laugh so hard multiple times, and so many questions or just comments popped up.
But one thing that I think we could transition to like a different kind of topic is the like this idea of, so with past lives, like you have this current human experience that people attach to strongly, and they believe that like the ideas that they're generating, or the concept of in my mind, or one of the rabbit holes I've gone down is like the collective unconscious. And so Carl Jung would talk about like these archetypes, and that this kind of like underlying thread of certain personalities and energy is our ego is accessing it, and then it's getting expressed through us, through this ego, which is the kind of like observer and decider, but it's not the originator of the ideas. And I read this one book called The User Illusion.
What was the book by Carl Jung?
Just his philosophy.
Okay.
In general. So he was, under Freud, and Freud was the first one to kind of uncover that the unconscious is really the driver of certain things, of certain behaviors. And then Carl Jung split off from him and came up with these archetypes that he found these common threads in human behaviors, that although you're different people, you're acting the same. And you'd like to think that you're an individual who's behaving the way you are because of your experiences and your logic and stuff like this. But really there's something else that's down here that's bubbling up and expressing itself through you. And in that book, The User Illusion, it would talk about how you have all these senses, and we are just like a computer that has access to vision and smell and taste and sound and touch, but it's an overwhelming amount of information. The brain can only process like 126 bits a second or something like that, but it's experiencing, like the eyes themselves pick up 11 million bits. So the ego is kind of like the filter. The subconscious is experiencing all these things, and then there's a filter level, and what makes it into conscious is a microscopic part of what you're experiencing. And the idea that, so there's certain archetypes and stuff like the king, warrior, magician, lover, and the shadows that bubble up. But that faith part of the mantras is that you can, and kind of like what Joe Dispenza says, like you can adjust your filter of what you allow to come through. So in my mind, manifestation is that you're just focusing on certain things, so that you're adjusting the filter of what senses are kind of getting heightened and picking up information about.
Yeah. I haven't gotten to Carl Jung as much as I'd like to. I have this one book by an author that was his apprentice, and I'm forgetting his name. But yeah, thanks for sharing those stories. I think the meditation retreat was super funny, and I wanted to kind of like poke the anger within you a little bit, and then like re-ask, was it really mental though? And yeah, I mean the extreme conditions of like you're, or not extreme conditions, but much different environmental conditions than Ohio or Chicago. You're from Chicago. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, if you get eczema, it's kind of hard to think your way past that, you know?
I bet there's a way. If I could placebo the shit
We
out
were
of
just
it.
talking about placebo and the power of the mind, but yeah, I haven't done a meditation retreat before. I've been hearing it multiple times now, or I've seen a few people within my life talk about it, and it's something that I want to do. It'd probably be something maybe in Texas I would do because they have one a couple hours away from Austin.
Yeah, that one outside of Dallas is the most funded one in the world.
Really?
It's the nicest one in the world.
Oh, sweet.
So I've heard really good things about it.
Okay.
But I'm curious for you, like what other type of retreats or experiences? Like I know we just talked to Ross about like the challenging type things of getting exposed to, but are there any other subjects or like things that you have been on your radar?
Well, I mean, past experiences or retreats, haven't really done many. I would like to do more. Yeah, I mean, I've been to Thailand. I've done this ayahuasca retreat. I haven't really done like as much traveling as I would like to in comparison to you. And yeah, now that I think about it, it's like I want to start experiencing going on more retreats, but yeah, just to kind of answer your other comment, things that I'm interested in right now, it's been primarily, it moved from the study of Bitcoin's technology to understanding macroeconomics. And then I got a good gist of that, just to understand how society works. If you had like truly free markets, right? I think that I went from a stage of, because like people's understanding in modern day society of capitalism, the word is just so, it's just taken so differently. Like there's a lot of people that love the word, they love capitalism. There's some people that love communism or Marxism. And we live in a freer society within the United States, but that's not to say that it's true free market capitalism. It's more of a capitalist society than China. But there's different, there's different regulatory kind of walls that prevent people from, we could talk about like food corporations and all these other things that, just different conglomerations of corporations that have had a decent amount of power that can then subject the judicial, legislative branches of government. And so it's not really a free market that's separate from government. It's a lot of, as we were discussing previously, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of human nature that's just kind of crippled true free market capitalism. But Bitcoin brings that back, which is really cool because it's like there's no stopping that, right? And so that's kind of taken my natural curiosity towards, okay, so like if I have enough wealth, Bitcoin, to be able to like within the next 10 years somehow, if we do get into a society that's hyper Bitcoinized, which means we're not using dollars anymore, we're using Bitcoin. That could be very possible. People can't really wrap their heads around that, but if you look at different events and different things that are happening around the world, it's trending in that direction. So
if that was the case, how in a society like that, you just engage in the market of who's collecting the resources to provide protection and infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think it would put pressure on governments to not be able to have an infinite supply of money, thus allowing them to just fuck up all the time. And by fucking up, I mean that they're able to conduct different policies, actions in a way that there's no repercussions because they can just print more money. And every time they print more money, they have a bill. There's a lot of things hidden in that bill so that they can continue their certain agendas. If they have Bitcoin is run by mathematics, rules, not rulers. And so if there's a limited supply of resources, you act differently. That's pretty common sense, I think, for most people. Like if you live in the middle of a village in the Amazon where resources are scarce, you're going to act differently with your tribe, right? So their actions, politicians' actions and whatnot will change. And that's a really good thing in my opinion. I think government will get much smaller. I think the federal government within the United States, and there's just different global agencies too, but will get smaller. And decentralization of information is already happening, but also power will happen. Corporations will probably, people, you go, I mean, here in Austin, we're in a really cool spot in the world, I think. We're in a really, I'm very grateful for being here because we have people that are really embodying trends of eating very clean and really just ignoring some of the hard to ignore food branches that come from like a few corporations. I mean, like Hershey or I don't know, Coca-Cola. Like Coca-Cola is very much known for soda, but they own so much more than you can realize. And so anyways, I'm going off of so many tangents, but that's where my knowledge went during COVID because I was really confused as to this kind of like hive mind reaction to COVID. And then also to the combination of George Floyd and all that stuff. And I was like, something's really wrong here. And it's not just, there's something hidden. There's something behind what happened with George Floyd. There's something that is behind, and I knew it. I knew
someone's choosing the promotion and keeping certain things in our face the whole time.
Yeah. And then
smoke screen.
Yeah. And then I think a good portion of people understand centralized social media algorithms. We're in a, 2 to 3 years prior to this moment right now, we didn't know this as much. There's engineers that craft social media algorithms and platforms to addict you like a casino gambling machine, but as well as they control the information that's displayed to you much more. And now Elon's kind of trying to make an example of that and fix that because it was really becoming scary, in my opinion, leading up to almost a year ago before Elon bought Twitter. The fact checking and censorship was really getting bad. It's getting really bad. And what was cool that I saw, and many people might have different opinions of Elon. I'm personally, from a high level overview, I don't study Elon in regards to his Twitter pursuit, but it seems like he's pretty genuine with allowing free speech and not being really censorship with liberal, or not even liberal, but just any political ideology. And it seems pretty apparent that he's trying to allow free speech in a genuine way and just a scalable way. And so I even saw, I heard, I think briefly, like President Biden, his cabinet said something that was like it was fact checked when Elon had Twitter, in the Elon realm, and the presidential cabinet, like they took it down. I was like, whoa, because otherwise, pre-Elon, it would have been reinforced, promoted, and so that's not good. And so, anyways, where I'm going with all that is, it went from there's a problem here in society that I'm seeing. There's some hidden, there's things we just maybe the masses don't really understand behind COVID, behind George Floyd, and behind like U.S. social issues. And I was like, I got to figure something out. And then I stumbled upon Bitcoin and all these revolving topics. And so I just really granularized my understanding of Bitcoin and I immersed myself. Like the main reason for moving out to Austin was to work for this Bitcoin company. And it seemed to be a hub of Bitcoiners, which it is. We have a Bitcoin Commons. We have like some of the most prominent Bitcoin enthusiasts that come to our office and that come to this Bitcoin Commons. It's like Texas is pro Bitcoin too. It seems from from a political view too. So that's why I moved. But then like as I started to really get settled here, I came to Squatch and I really started to balance my way of life. So exercise, nutrition, relationships, friendships. I felt like a lot of that was kind of missing when I was back in Massachusetts, and a lot of different realms of a balanced human experience just felt so off around COVID, and so since then, I've been diving into friendships. Right now, podcast, passion project that allows me to express creative thought processes that we're just doing right now. And then eventually like romantic and functional training, mobility, all these different things. And it's just kind of evolving. And I'm picking at different parts. And so like a part of that's kind of been lacking on the Bitcoin space. It's my job now. So I'm like, I'm in it.
You're spending the time there.
Yeah. And that was the goal, was like get into Bitcoin so that because like otherwise your free time, if you're not into Bitcoin, you're going to have to spend your free time to understand it. But now that I'm immersed into it, I learn about it on the job, which is really fucking cool. And I'm very grateful for that. And so now with my free time, I'm getting into more like as of late because of the experience within the ayahuasca ceremonies. I'm getting into more spiritual, just a curiosity of information. So I bought that book we were talking about. It's called Cutting Out Spiritual Materialism, something along those lines. And just really, I just started it. I'm like 10 pages in, but it's already cool. There's three masters, or three masters of the ego or something, where it's like the master of the form of the voice or speech, and then the mind. And it talks about, it seems to be diving into like, yeah, essentially your ego is masquerading as a spiritual, I don't know, like you're superior to other people. And I really wanted to dig into that. I mean, it's only been a month since my ayahuasca ceremony, my first one ever. So I was like, I was feeling these elevated emotions. I'm like, whoa, I went through a cool experience. And we were discussing how you can just feel different wavelengths within other people when you have a discussion with them. We vibe. I've said this with Bray, we vibe, and different people around Squatch. And so there's like, you want to make sure that you still remain humble, and you maintain humility, and you have this well-balanced character. And then, yeah, if you're starting a spiritual path, it seems like you can still get tripped up by your ego thinking you're on a spiritual path. Just like this dude that was showing you all these different magnificent spiritual temples or whatever it may be, fucking smoking. He wants to abandon his family, like all these monks smoking and drinking, and like that's lust, right? And that's not, I mean, I don't think that's a practice within human nature that would bring you to a spiritual path, because you're relying on something externally to provide you with some kind of security, right? And this comes back to, I'm just going on a tangent right now, but like there's another book that I read. Oh my God, it's Jiddu Krishnamurti, and it's called,
Never heard of it.
It's called Total Freedom. Unbelievable human being, but it's just like a huge book that has chapters of all the talks that he had around the world from many different years. And it just compiled into this book. And it almost seems like every single time, like he just brings you down every single emotion, every single thought that you could have, and kind of like just dissects the mind. And it all comes back to security. Your ego, it seems, I would probably have to reread the book and go back to it and highlight it more. But your mind, your ego is a tool to solve problems, survival mechanism. It comes back to security in almost every single thought. And Naval Ravikant even describes this after he's done his own experiences with meditation. He says it in like a tweet. It's like 90% or 95% of your thoughts are all fear-based, and 5% of them are desire, pleasure.
That's what I think is like evil people are really scared. There is something at risk that they're very fearful. And it could just be that they're really attached to this human experience, and they're fearing death. And so they will go to extreme measures to protect that, to help ease that.
Well, yeah,
fear.
I think I haven't read that book, One Nation Under Blackmail, but what I could just going down my own kind of pursuit of what I think happened is it's this game theoretical play between different nations, right? It's always been a constant tribal warfare, right? And it's just led to modern times where that evolved into different information agencies like the FBI, like the CIA, that it's just been a never ending thing. And we've just gotten to a point where the act of violence has changed, whether what used to be like a fucking spear stabbed into the throat, but now it's, I'm blackmailing you with this information that if anybody found out in the press, you're fucked because you're the king of England or whatever, the Queen of England or whatever. So, and now that the fact that you just slept with an underage girl at Epstein's island house, you had to do whatever the fuck we tell you. And so that just evolved into this sex trafficking underground, situation where it's, I think it's been a power structure, game theoretical thing. And it's just gotten so out of hand where lust has just corrupted, absolutely corrupted. There's no going back. Like, it's going to be so hard for you, the people that are involved with this at the top chain of this Jeffrey Epstein situation thing, that it's going to be really very difficult for you to ever be forgiven because of how egregious and how like just gross what you've done. And it's like that's just like, think about it like this. It could have just started off with like, I don't know, you're one of these people, like one of these individuals wanted to do some good in the world. They wanted to be a politician. They wanted to be someone involved in the power hierarchy to help the world be a better place. And what they expected was completely different. And they got sucked in to this blackmailing situation that there's just nothing they could do. Like, it almost felt like there was nothing they could do, because it's like, if you say anything about what you've seen here, we'll kill your family.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, I'm an innocent person. I just got dragged into this. But I love my daughter. I love my son. I love my wife. Please don't kill them. I'll do whatever you say. And it's just like, I get it. So it's just this like never ending cycle of just manipulation and lust and terrible deeds. And we need to get out of it. Like, we need to like give all these fucking people that were at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion and conducting all this stuff, give them an ayahuasca ceremony or a fucking breath work or sound bath or something. I don't know.
How to get that initial exposure would be interesting. There's this magician who set up this experiment where everyone in this situation was an actor other than the one person coming into it. And they would slowly get this person to cross their boundaries little by little by little, to where the final wedge was that they had to push someone off of a building. They were convinced that they were all going to go to jail, or that like really bad things were going to happen unless this person pushed this person off of a building. And they would get someone to do that. Like,
wow.
within like, an hour, like someone just walking down the street, and they like stumbled into a situation where they're slowly like, they just creep the boundary of what you need to do just to feel like we need to do this. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, they slowly amplified up to the point of murdering someone.
It's fucked.
It's wild.
And so like, I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetimes, but I do believe that we can try to change the incentive structures of power. Like the system that we're in of, I don't even know. I could be totally naive when I'm saying this, but
Same.
I hope that we live in a world where it's like there's no nations, there's no borderlines, but like you're able to have all this one mission. The entire world is it's just unified in one mission. That could be possible maybe thousands of years from now. I don't think it's going to happen now.
I sometimes I say, I feel like if there was a civilization on Mars, that we wouldn't be so competitive on Earth. Like, it would be us versus them versus everyone here. Well, we're just going to compete with each other.
Which would probably be better.
Absolutely, because then you maximize resources for the civilization that's here.
And your whole experience is on this planet, so you just be like unified together, just trying to accomplish this mission.
Specialization is the most efficient use of resources. So like individual areas, like, okay, Africa, open plains, like solar panels like crazy. Like, you just maximize the resources of what each spot has, and then you share it without taxing everybody, so that the few people who handle the logistics of transportation don't get to keep all the things.
Then I start to think it's like, oh, well, would there be like a global communist kind of regime that
For sure, there's got to be some top level power structure, but better than having like, how many countries are there? Like 120? I don't know how many countries, but like there's all these other little fucking mafias that run and control resources. It's like, well, maybe and fuck, do we have a government in general? Like, we used to have representatives because I physically couldn't go talk to get my point of view heard by the person that was making the rules. So we had to hire one guy, elect one guy that was going to get every week to spend his time coming to hear what our issues were and what we wanted, and then represent us somewhere else. And now with the internet, that's pretty irrelevant. I think it'd be a really interesting experiment if, for an election, it wasn't names on a ballot. It was like a list of topics, like climate change or infrastructure or agriculture, these different things, and then individual positions. And then you vote on a position and you rank it in importance to you. And so then after an election, you have a nationwide poll of what topics are the most important and what the most amount of people felt was the stance on it. And then we take our collective resources of tax money and apply it to like solving the things that we want.
And what is crucial in what you just mentioned, that kind of structure, is to maintain a free market of information, because then that's where you get true results of what people care about. Because you bring up even like climate change, that seems to be the most significant, disastrous topic as of late, right? But there's something that comes to mind after I was watching a podcast with Chris Williamson, and he expressed that he was saying it blows my mind that people are so hyper focused on climate change when there's also nuclear war, there's nanotechnology, there's another potential virus pandemic, orchestrated virus pandemic. And he, I think, said something along the lines of like, not just like random, just like an actual, like, there's
engineered.
Biochemical warfare is, there's proof that there's been investments by governments to test and research on different biochemical substances, and it's a different type of warfare.
And how to deploy them. Like I was reading this book, Poisoner in Chief, and it was on the guy who headed the MK Ultra division. And they, like off the coast of San Francisco, they were testing of if they put a mist into the air with this certain chemical, how much of the population it could reach with the deployment of it. And they did like not a harmful one, but then they tested random samples of people like a week later, and 100% of the people had contact with that. So they test these things and see if they could use it in a covert way.
Yeah. And so that's where I was going with all that, is like, it's my theory, and I could probably do more research and read more on this when I have more time, but that climate change is more abruptly and purposely discussed by politicians in power currently, because our financial system the current financial system is collapsing, and Bitcoin makes it without any rulers, right? So like if you understand the monetary system they had, or the previous power regimes had much more control over human populations through monetary debasement or whatever it may be, with quantitative measurements with our money supply and just our money. Now that they can't do that, well, what's stopping a politician from trying to create ESG carbon footprint rules? Which means, where I'm going with that is, you be like, certain actions and things that you do are now going to be restricted based off of how much carbon that goes out into the environment. And just a different way for them to be able to control you. And not to say that climate change isn't something that's serious, that we can be better with having more just healing Mother Nature and being in tune with Mother Nature. I'm not dismissing that at all.
No,
what I'm saying is that politicians' agendas are not in our favor for being free with our ideas and way of being. And so I think that to just kind of close the loop on what I was saying, is like, the true free market of information, so people could vote, is very important. And so like, Elon's kind of trying to do that. And there's also Bitcoin, and then there's also Nostr, which I don't know if you've ever heard of, but Nostr is this very interesting, like, there's no, like, even though Elon's trying to do it, it's still a centralized platform, but with 100 people in control of it. Nostr is like this client and relayed, like truly decentralized social media, which is like really cool. Like, there's no one stopping it. Like, you can't stop the flow of information and news and whatever from this. Granted, there could be certain people that are running relays of information and streams of information, and they could shut off that relay, if I'm saying the correct term, relay. But then you could just point your channel to someone else that's presenting that information that was just cut off.
One of the other servers that's connected on that.
Yeah. And so you have to be careful. I mean, we're in the Wild West. Like that. So Bitcoin and then this decentralized relay of information Like that to me we're just in the beginning of the internet.
I mean,
and then AI.
I was gonna say with ChatGPT, and Elon was even talking about having a truth GPT to have where like
yeah.
There's still one person that's in charge of saying what is true though.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
dude, things are gonna get so different so quickly. And yeah, you were mentioning the human mind, brainstem, our ability to process 126 bits per time period, and then actually our subconscious holds that.
Well, the subconscious is receiving like 13 million bits a second.
Yeah.
The eyes are bringing in 11 million bits.
Right.
What's making it to consciousness is like 126.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Like 126,000, I think.
So for technology advancement to like 100x because of ChatGPT, 3D building, all this relaying of information being completely free, things are gonna get weird.
It'll be a whole different economy.
Yeah.
Where you don't need a labor force the size that we have, but then it can't be totally, a meritocracy of the value that you're adding. Otherwise, like the few people with the really good ideas that are using AI to deliver a whole bunch of value to so many people that like you're tightening the funnel on who's receiving the resources.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And so, man, we've been talking for like 2 hours. we started late. I think we started at like 11, like 11:10. It's at 1:22 right now.
Oh shit. Well,
we can fucking keep going.
Happy birthday.
Oh shit. Yeah, thanks, bro. Shit. Yeah. 30th birthday.
I was thinking of a way to like loop it back of like, talking about fear and things like that. The biggest fear is life. Coming to face
Get older, mortality.
Yeah. Spin it back.
Yeah, that hasn't really hit me quite yet. I mean, I think I've already experienced like pretty crazy things. To a point where well, I mean, like I'll share a couple, and I think I've already shared on the podcast. Like I almost died like by a head injury. Yeah, like I went head first into rocks into a lake. 14 staples in my head. I've just had like different experiences where I haven't gotten injured to the extent where I'm incapacitated. Clearly, I'm a pretty healthy person, but I think that the quote, "Man has 2 lives and he discovers he only has 1." Or I always fuck this up. I was just reviewing my last episode. I just talked about this. Yeah, the second starts when he realizes he only has 1, and I think that moment, that instance for me occurred many years ago, and but I don't know. I think still.
I had a friend pass away from cliff jumping. It's amazing that things that can seem innocent. And then I had another a friend's brother who jumped off a boat and went head first, and now he's paralyzed. Like it was like a sandbar that he didn't see there. And
oh fuck!
Like we think we're just doing innocent fun.
Yeah.
And you can't.
Yeah. So I've done a few things where I got real lucky. Didn't. I should have probably broken my neck, and the day after too, it was like my entire spine was sore. So yeah, it was very close to being incapacitated. But anyways, yeah, I think the idea, the significance, the embodiment of mortality, that we're not, this bodysuit that we're wearing is not forever, and you want to take care of yourself physically. That has already been embodied for the past couple of years. I would even say 4 to 5 years. Starting around like 25, 26, more so over the course of the past couple of years because of going to the gym and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, entering into the 30s, I could be copying Bray here because Bray turned 30. He's almost a year older than me, and his word of his 30th birthday and going into his 30s was intention. And so us talking about it's great that we're naturally curious and we want to learn and we're intelligent and we're open-minded. And at the same time, it's like, all right,
tighten it up.
how do I funnel this in a way that like makes my human experience just more fulfilling? And I think the podcast kind of does this. That's the beauty of this podcast is like, I can talk about all these crazy topics, but still maintain what really matters to me at the end of the day. And that's human connection. It's like having deep, cool, intimate connections like this or conversations. And so for me, I think it's my 30s. I'm excited. I feel very good with where I'm at in life. Like if I were to die tomorrow, I mean, I could probably change a few things, but for the most part, I'm really satisfied with my life. And I think there's more deepening of friendships that I can do. And there's more I think that's the focus for me is like maybe building this podcast more, continuing my path with this Bitcoin company, seeing where that goes, and then focusing on friendships and my health. But I feel like I'm on the path already. Right. And so
you radiate it. I'll tell you that. It's like, you're a new friend to me that I really appreciate. And
thank you, man.
Your presence is energizing. You have a vitality to you where you're excited to be where you are. There's not like scattered energy of like feeling that you're running between things and you're just mixing things up and like trying to chase different dragons.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And man, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm trying to mutually explain why I want to connect with you too. I think that you just have this presence of you have a rawness to your personality. You display who you are wholeheartedly. And I don't know if I can compete with what you just said there, but like when I know I'm gonna vibe with someone really well, I just know it. My intuition speaks to me. And that instantly popped up with your sister and you. And you both I'm able to like, I feel like I can freely express who I am authentically and not hold back. It was like as if I've known you for 10 years and your sister for 10 years. We were just cracking up weird ass jokes at story night. And you're just like a super interesting dude too. Like we haven't even mentioned this, but you're a culinary artist.
I like food.
Well, we did say sushi Sundays.
Sushi and superpowers.
Sushi Sunday superpower.
Sushi and superpowers. And now I think I'll put it on Sundays just to get the triple S.
Yeah, you got to get the triple S. But you're just you're creative. You're not afraid to be who you are and explore and adventure. And I like people like that. It's similar to Zach, like Zach Horvath too. Like he's very adventurous. He's on his own journey right now.
I love it.
I don't know if he's ever coming back. It's funny because I messaged him on Instagram and I was like, I would love to have you in person on the podcast. And I was like, if you ever come back, because I don't think you're coming back. That's what I said to him.
Dude.
And then the next 2 days later, he took like a screen recording of changing his Instagram location. Yep. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's ever going to come back to Austin, but I think he will. But anyways, I just, man, the people here in Austin, you, Zach, people at Squatch, like it's just, I'm so grateful because I just feel like, unfortunately, I couldn't really find that in my hometown at least. And not to throw any negativity in that direction. I think we're just in a rural part of, New England where you're stuck in certain ways. Where in Austin was just like, it's either there's natives here that are still natural, like just unique people, and then there's just transplants that come here and seeking a more adventurous and maybe creative lifestyle. And so,
I appreciate you.
Yeah, man,
for saying all that. But I feel a similar way where, and I used to kind of like like, oh, my friends back home, they like these other things, and I'm on this different kind of path. But
Mm-hmm.
there was just only it felt like just only certain parts of me did I express around them
Yeah.
or with them. Like we had specific conversations
Mm.
or subjects that we would talk about
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that. But around beers and sports and
Yeah. Yeah.
girls and parties and things like that. But coming out to Austin,
It's everything.
I'm getting fed so much socially by people in
Yeah.
such different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it took leaving the hometown to get the exposure and to force myself to put myself out there to go to different types of events
Mm.
and go to retreats on my own and like meet people in a very vulnerable space where you get to kind of start from a baseline of 0 and
Mm.
you realize that if you can express yourself how you want to express yourself.
Mm.
Like you're not in a box of like the kind of social dynamic that you've been in. And so you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
freedom to be like, these are the things that I want to talk about. And this is what I'm excited to talk about. And
Yeah.
like listening to people talk about things they're excited about is
It's great.
just, I'm like keep going, feed me
Yeah.
more, feed me more.
Yeah. 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 It's truly a blessing to be in this part of town and the world. Well, we got potentially different events we could go to. The festival.
Oh, the rest of
Yeah. Um, yeah. You want to conclude it? That's a wrap, folks. All right. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you
Peace.
for putting up with my rambles.